as they called Saddam Hussein to us, than it is his boss, the Ayatollah. If the next president is a seemingly likable guy, then we'll go back to seeing the Ayatollah's face on TV all the time instead. And on it goes. So I think it's at least quite possible that it's a deliberate plan to destroy any kind of reformist movement in Iran by doing our best to make it look like a CIA plot to have a democracy reformist, pro-democratic reformist movement in Iran. Now, one of the other things that really underlies this entire case is the entire case for war, especially as put forward by the neoconservatives, is that the Ayatollahs are crazy. You know, they're like Pat Robertson or something, but worse. They're out of their mind, and they're the ones in charge. They want the 12th Imam to come and end the world, so they cannot be dealt with. You cannot make a negotiation. You cannot sign a contract with the mentally ill. They're out of their mind, so we cannot deal with them. And yet, the history shows that that's just not true. After September 11th, actually, I think on September 11th, maybe it was the 12th, 1 million people came out in downtown Tehran and did a candlelight vigil for the United States. Not only were we attacked in the most horrific way, but by people that they hate too. And so it was government approved, of course, but the people of Tehran came out 1 million strong. And after September 11th, they worked with people in our State Department on negotiations that remained very hush-hush for a couple of years. And their interest was in helping us in Afghanistan. They hated the Taliban. In fact, Iran almost invaded Afghanistan themselves in 1998 when the Taliban executed 13 of their diplomats. And they couldn't wait to get rid of the Taliban, and they couldn't wait to be our friends and help us in getting rid of the Taliban. And they worked with people in the State Department on the National Security Council in secret for 2 or 3 months on some of these issues until the Axis of Evil speech, where George Bush, who, by the way, was George Bush's son, got up there and tried to pretend that Iran and Iraq were part of an axis together. These countries that we financed both sides of their war against each other for 8 years to the tune of the deaths of 1 million people. And they said, these men are the axis of evil, Saddam Hussein and the Ayatollah Khomeini. And we will not negotiate with evil. Evil is evil, and we're good, and so we're too good to negotiate with them, and we won't deal with them at all. And good journalism says the Iranians were absolutely shocked and disappointed. They couldn't believe it. They wanted so badly to take the opportunity of our terror war to open up and warm up their relations with us and work together against our common enemies. And a year later, just on the eve of the invasion of Iraq, they sent to the State Department what Gordon Prather calls the golden offer. And you can actually find the PDF file of this thing online. At ipsnews.net, they have it. If you search site for the Iran peace offer, you will see in the PDF file they offered to negotiate their status with Hamas and Hezbollah. They said, we will make them disarm and just become part of the PLA in Palestine and part of the Lebanese government. And we'll never support, their independent violent actions again. We'll work with you. We'll put our entire nuclear program on the table, and we would love to turn over 5 al-Qaeda guys that we've captured, including Osama bin Laden's sons, if you'll just give us the leadership of the Mujahideen al-Khalq, those communist terrorists I told you about before. And not only did America, the American National Security Council, say absolutely not to this, they gave a stiff dressing down to the Swiss ambassador who had had the temerity to deliver a peace offer, an all-encompassing peace offer. From the Iranians to us. It also offered to work with us in Iraq, which of course we took them up on that part. At least we worked with them, if not letting them work with us. There's a couple of great articles about that. The first one is called Burnt Offering in the American Prospect, and the sources for that are Flint Leverett and Hillary Mann. She's now Hillary Mann Leverett, his wife. And one was on the National Security Council, the other in the State Department. And these were 2 of the people who were working hard to work out our relationship with the Iranian government and who were forbidden from doing so and then resigned. They now keep a great blog at raceforiran.com, which is absolutely indispensable to you. So they gave us the golden offer. They're not crazy. They're not waiting for the 12th imam to come back and kill everybody any more than just the vaguest sense when you hear, never mind the craziest, but when you hear the Protestant Christians say Jesus is coming back, fine, that doesn't mean on their timetable, or necessarily in their lifetime. Okay, so I think that fact, the fact of the peace offer of 2003, the fact that their willingness to continue to abide by the safeguards agreement, no matter how many times we beat them over the head with it, pretending that they're not abiding by it, the fact that they're not making nuclear weapons, I think, is a key indicator of the fact that they're people. They're not crazy. They're politicians. They have their own interests in mind, and they're perfectly possible to negotiate with, as much as the leadership of any other state in the world. And now to get to Barack Obama and his inheriting of this warmongering policy against Iran. He came in 2009 and gave a YouTube speech to the government and the people of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the first time an American president had ever called them that. And all due respect, Bush years are over, and we want to reach out our open hand to you, etc., and yet it was all a lie. Just like in the Bush years, diplomacy is simply laying the groundwork for war. How do you have a war if you can't claim that, well, we tried to talk to them first, but they couldn't be talked with? We need that excuse, the same one they used in 2002 and 2003 against their so-called partner in that axis of evil. And, Flint Leverett and Hillary Mann Leverett at raceforrand.com have written extensively about the fact that the negotiations were never serious. Barack Obama offered them, it's a little bit complicated, but offered them a deal where they would swap out some of their uranium for some fuel rods, and they would get the finished fuel rods from the French, and basically, they accepted the bargain. This was 1 year ago. They accepted the bargain, but they said, you know what, though? How about we swap uranium for uranium? Because we don't want to sit around waiting on and trusting the French to deliver us our uranium. In fact, the French had cheated the Iranians out of some nuclear technology back in the 1970s. They have a particular bad experience with that. So they said, look, we'll take your same deal, but let's just swap finished fuel rods for raw uranium. And then that way we know we're not getting cheated. Barack Obama said, absolutely not. See, I told you they're crazy and we can't deal with them, and forget it. And so ever since then, the State Department, particularly Hillary Clinton's people at the State Department, routinely say, yeah, well, we'll talk with them, but we don't expect to get anywhere with them. We don't expect to make any progress with this. And of course, they're not working for progress. They know that the Iranians are not going to give up their civilian nuclear energy program, and they know it's not a nuclear weapons program, but they'll continue to use it as an excuse to lay sanctions, to support terrorists, to try to come up with a way to force a regime change of one kind or another in that country. And they'll continue to beat that dead horse no matter how disproven it all is. And so really I think it's fair to say that Barack Obama's policy toward Iran has been a 0% improvement over the Bush years. And maybe it's even worse for getting the people of the world, this country and the rest of the world's hopes up that perhaps we could have a reasonable settlement here instead of all of these lies. Now, very quickly, because Ernie was showing me fingers that represented minutes over there a second ago, I wanted to mention some of the likely consequences of any full-scale war with Iran. Of course, you can read in the WikiLeaks how the Israelis say, if you don't bomb them, we will. And of course, if the Israelis do start the war, we'll be in it anyway. So that's the kind of blackmail that our State Department officers are hearing from the Israelis and reporting back. But whether the Americans start it or the Israelis start it, that's funny. I don't think anybody ever considered the possibility the Iranians would start it, because that's just nonsense. But no matter how it starts, if it does start, it will, as Norman Podhoretz, one of the greatest advocates for full-scale war with Iran, said, cause a wave of anti-Americanism around the world that will make our current situation look like a picnic. That's the words of, he actually says, if we attack Iran, which I hope and pray we will, pray even, we will, it will cause a wave of anti-Americanism around the world. And I fear that even though George Bush said we're not at war against Islam, he sure did kill a lot of Muslims in a lot of places. And bin Laden and his allies' narrative has always been that no matter what the Americans say, they are at war with Islam, and that's why you have to join us to help defend it, etc. And if our government was to start a full-scale war with Iran, even if they could successfully topple the Iranian government or whatever, I fear that that would just lead 1 billion plus Muslims in the world to conclude that bin Laden was right, at least about that. That we don't discriminate between Arab and Persian, we don't discriminate between Shia and Sunni, we don't discriminate between Egyptians, Iraqis, or Filipinos. We're coming to kill you if you believe in Islam. And if they believe that, then we will have that clash of civilizations that the neoconservatives have been pushing so hard to create since September 11th. And it's just completely unnecessary. It doesn't have to be this way. That would be the worst consequence. Also, it would destroy the world economy completely. Price of oil would go up above $200 a barrel. We have 50,000 combat forces and uncounted mercenaries still in Iraq. We have more than 100,000 troops in Afghanistan. They are within range of actual Iranian missiles that exist. They also have supersonic sea-skimming missiles that they've bought from the Russians and the Chinese that pose a major threat to our aircraft carriers. And for that matter, the Fifth Fleet stationed at Bahrain just across the Persian Gulf. That's why they call it the Persian Gulf. You know, that's Persia right there. And they closed those gates of Hormuz and shut down oil even temporarily coming out of that gate. That could destroy what's left of the very fragile remaining world economy. And it could lead to great catastrophe. And so now Ernie said something in his talk about how I was supposed to say something positive at the end, and so I'll bring up the fact that just 2 weeks ago, and actually in the WikiLeaks State Department documents as well, it's indicated that Robert Gates, our Secretary of War, has no interest in having a war with Iran whatsoever, mostly because he recognizes the same consequences that I just listed for you, the threat to our military assets in the Middle East, his top priority, of course. But as long as the lies that underline the entire narrative of discussion about Iran and American foreign policy persist, the danger persists. And as long as the Likud government in Israel exists, the danger persists. So I think it's incumbent on all of us who have the ability to see through these lies, the ability to teach the opposite of these lies to people who are willing to hear it. I think it's incumbent upon us that we remain vigilant, continue to do so. Thank you very much.
Uncovering the secrets and exposing the lies. Did he even take a breath? I mean, you know, there's no questions for you don't even know the question to ask him. He already has the answers for all this stuff, and Charles and I have been so blessed by knowing people like Larissa and Scott and be able to share that with you guys, because if we don't get the truth out there, we're going to be the victims of our own believing in lies, and we will be in continuous war.